En América Latina y el Caribe, la falta de financiamiento verde es uno de los principales desafíos para enfrentar el cambio climático y la pérdida de biodiversidad. Necesitamos más inversión inteligente para garantizar medios de vida sostenibles, proteger la biodiversidad y adaptarnos a los eventos climáticos extremos. La iniciativa Innovación para las Finanzas Verdes en Latinoamérica y el Caribe, impulsada por el Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo con el apoyo de Suecia, apoya a gobiernos, sector privado y comunidades generando conocimiento y evidencia para promover decisiones más estratégicas sobre inversiones sostenibles hacia un financiamiento que haga más resiliente a nuestra región. Por eso, fomentamos el intercambio de experiencias de éxito, apoyamos el desarrollo de herramientas financieras innovadoras, fortalecemos capacidades para movilizar presupuestos verdes y junto a los países apoyamos la creación de marcos normativos financieros. El momento de actuar e invertir por la naturaleza es ahora.
Muy buenos días, muchas gracias por conectarse. En breves
Good morning.
minutos
Thank you for
daremos
joining.
inicio a la sesión.
We will be starting in some minutes.
Hola, muy buenos días. Bienvenidos a esta tercera sesión del
Good
programa de
morning. Welcome
gestión de
to this
conocimientos
third
en estrategias e
session
instrumentos
of the
de
Knowledge
financiamiento
Management
verde.
Program on
GIAC,
Strategies and
queremos
Instruments for
agradecerles
Green
por estar
Financing
con
LAC.
conectados el
We
día
would
de
like to
hoy
thank you for
y
joining
también
us
hacerles
today
recordar que estamos
and
pasando
also
esta
to
sesión
remind
por
you
streaming en nuestro
that
canal de
this is
YouTube.
being streamed
También quedará
through YouTube
grabada para que puedan
and it's
poder
going to be
revisarla y
recorded,
verla otras
so
veces
you're
más en
going
el
to be
futuro y
able to
también para que
see it
puedan
again
compartirlo.
and share
Entonces,
it.
en breves segundos vamos a compartir la pantalla
In some
para
minutes, we're
poder
going to
dar
share our
inicio a la
screen to start this session.
Genial. Entonces, primero quería darles la bienvenida
First, we would like to welcome you
y también recordarles
Recording
cuál es
in
la
progress.
agenda de
and
esta
also to
sesión. Vamos
remind
a
you
dar
the
una pequeña
agenda for this
introducción. Vamos a
session.
recordar
We
qué
will
es lo que
start
vimos en la sesión
by an
anterior y cuáles son los
introduction. We're
objetivos.
going to remember
Y
our
presentar
goals.
una
We
breve
also
introducción a
going
la
to
temática
provide
para
a
poder
brief
repasar
thematic
algunos
introduction
datos generales y un
to try
panorama
to
que nos
strengthen
va a
some of
brindar
the general
esta
data
imagen
and the
panorámica de
perspective
las experiencias que vamos a ver el día de
regarding
hoy.
the experiences
Y
that
nos
we're going to
acompañan
share
dos
today.
expositores
We have two
representando a Uruguay y
speakers
Barbados con
from
experiencias de éxito
Barbados and
muy
Uruguay
interesantes y que nos ayudan a
with
identificar cuáles son
some
los
successful
principales
cases that are
los
going to help
desafíos y
us to
también cuáles son los
identify the
principales
main
retos al momento de la
challenges
implementación de
for
los
implementing
financiamientos mixtos o
blended
blendables. Finalmente
financing.
tendremos un espacio de preguntas y
Then we will
respuestas.
have a
Igual
space
empezamos a
for
recordar que
questions and
durante toda la
answers.
sesión los
And
invitamos
during
a
the entire
escribirlas
session,
por el
please
chat,
write your
¿no? En caso de
questions
que
in
no
the
desees abrir el
chat.
micro.
If you want, you can also open your microphone. And then we're going to have a discussion on plenary room. We have a different type of activity today. We're going to open our microphones and we're going to have an open discussion to share the main ideas. Finally, we are going to have the key messages and the main conclusions.
La siguiente diapositiva, por favor. También hacerles recordar que cuentan con los canales.
Today we have the service for interpreting.
Si es que estamos en un canal de inglés o en español.
You can choose English or Spanish.
Y bueno, nuevamente para presentarme, mi nombre es Grecia Gutiérrez.
My name is Grecia Gutierrez. I am part of the GIF4LAC team.
Comentarles que la sesión del día de hoy es
this session is our session number 3. We are going to refresh what we have seen. We had some results-based financing instruments in the previous sessions with 2 speakers from Costa Rica and Ecuador. They shared some very interesting experiences, and if you would like to see them again, you can find the recording and information that we have sent to you. Today, in our session 3, we're going to talk about blended finance, and our goal is to present these 2 successful cases in the region and to have this opportunity to exchange experiences and information. After that, I would like to acknowledge our participants in the program. We have had 4 sessions. This is the 3rd session of the program, and we also had an introductory session. So I would like to acknowledge all the participants. And I would like to give some minutes to our participant Janine Martinez, who is joining us from Honduras. She's part of the Financing Secretary in Honduras, and she's going to tell us about her experience in this topic. So Janine, please go ahead. You can turn your camera and microphone on, and please share your experience.
Sí, hola, buenos días, buenas tardes a todos.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Mucho gusto.
Se escucha y se ve súper bien.
Mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Janine Martínez.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Janine Martinez. I work for climate change in the Finance Secretary. This unit is part of the climate change law, and it supports resource management that we can get from different instruments for projects, and they are used to face all the challenges posed by climate change. I would like to thank all of you for this opportunity, for being able to share our experiences regarding this topic. And this is within the agreement, the Paris Agreement, that is the blended finance. Blended finance is a key strategy to mobilize resources in countries such as in Honduras, where the climate, financial challenges need innovative solutions. This is a very important step for us. Honduras is a country that is very vulnerable to the climate change and is facing very significant financial and social challenges. And this is more important because of climate change. Last year, Honduras achieved a goal to have their first sustainable green bond in the international market, and we had this successful experience. So we are trying to continue to issue these bonds. We also have the tax and the debt policies facing the climate change financing. That's why blended finance is key to attract private investment in these key sectors. In Honduras, we manage different projects for renewable energy, and Honduras promotes this kind of projects, these renewable energy projects, in order to achieve 80% of generation for 2038. Wind and energy is being used in Honduras, and our location really benefits from this energy. In Honduras, we consider that the access to electrical energy is a human right, just as the right to have water. Some of the projects that we manage, we also have a legal framework that allow us to have these new financing initiatives. We have also private and public partnerships. We also have the environmental protection law and also our national plan to adapt for climate change, and also the legislation that has been updated in 2021. We acknowledge the need of blended finance to achieve our environmental goals. As many countries, we are facing challenges. For example, the lack of appetite for risk, also the private requirements and the lack of guarantees, also the lack of a solid infrastructure, and this hinders the mobilization of capitals. We are also facing financial and economic risks, but even though blended finance is a key strategy to use the resources in high-impact projects, we can also generate some opportunities and proposals. And these meetings that we have been having provide us with some ideas to create a specific regulatory frameworks, and also to provide some training to the government and the private sectors regarding innovative structures supported by the multilateral banking. And this has been an achievement for us in our new experiences. And as a conclusion, this blended finance instrument is a very powerful tool to transform development in Honduras, but not only in Honduras, but in all of the countries who are taking part in this kind of meetings, to try to mobilize this kind of funds. We need to promote this culture for sustainable finance in the long term, including the issuing of green bonds to create these strategies that we need. In these workshops, we have received different information from different countries, and this is going to be very beneficial for future financing and legal frameworks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your experience and all the information that you have provided. I would like to share this also in the plenary discussion, because it is very important to share these experiences, these opportunities that you have mentioned. For example, the industries where each country can benefit from these changes. Thank you very much for your participation. And continuing with the agenda, I'm going to give the floor to our specialist who is here with us. He is an expert of specialist in green finance and strategic partnerships, and he's going to provide a general thematic introduction. And then we're going to start with our shared experiences. Antonio, go ahead, please. Thank you very much, Grecia. Good morning. My name is Antonio Garcia, and I'm going to provide a brief introduction, a general thematic introduction, because I think that Janine has already mentioned that this is a very powerful tool. The blended finance is a very powerful tool. So we're going to build on this concept all the useful tools need to be used correctly because we need to benefit from these tools, and also we need to duplicate these tools. They need to create reliability to all the agents involved. Next slide, please.
Perfecto. Entonces vamos a iniciar tratando de entender.
We're going to start trying to understand what is blended finance. We are going to see some myths around this concept to try to understand it better. Blended finance is not a financial instrument itself, but rather it is a way of structuring financing that allows different organizations to invest together with achieving their own objectives. We always say that blended finance is an innovative instrument. Yes, it is innovative, but each operation itself has a high level of innovation. And I think one of the benefits of this kind of financing is that it doesn't have any limits in the way of structuring. And also in the ways that we could use this financing. For example, the repayment or the rates. So we have an innovation component for all these elements. That's why we have to review some successful cases in our countries, because these are going to work as guidelines. So we suggest ideally the blended finance structures that have been implemented in other countries and in other contexts. This is going to provide guarantees for all the stakeholders. And the blended finance instrument is not specific to climate change, but is deeply related to climate change, because we're talking about this environment that is facing high risks, and blended finance is going to help in these challenges.
Aquí una pequeña estructura, digamos, de cómo funciona siempre.
Yes. Just to tell you a little bit about the structure, we have the private capital that comes from blended finance structures, and we also have private capital, which could be national or international. We notice that private capital is looking for opportunities, and when we are able to find the best formula to work with a project, this combination of capital flows from the private and public market is what we will call blended finance. Of course, this is something that the public and the private market, they converse, and we understand what's the benefits. This is associated with high risk projects. Private capital doesn't come by their own wheels. Of course, we need to consider that they need to consider what's the return of investment, the ROI. And in this case, we need to consider the incentive for them, the risks. That means what are the coverage of risks that they have, so we could have this private capital in order to have blended finance. Next slide. We need to consider what are the risks, what are the real risks. It could have ROI that could be low, not aligned with the same goals for the same market. So that's why it will not be feasible for the private market to join in with financing. That's why we are promoting certain flexibility. We need to be aware that since this is a public segment or a sector, this comes from the taxpayers. So that's why we will have to be quite specific when we're covering the risks, because we don't want to modify the private ecosystem. We don't want to have harmful disadvantage in the market. We need to, that's why we are going to discuss on real experiences on how we manage to handle this blended finance in order to have a proper result. I think that will be all for the introduction. Well, we have a little reminder of other initiatives that we have in the region. We, of course, have chosen the forestry solutions because this has lots of potential for Latin America. We also have a global coalition because Latin America is number one in these agricultural transactions. And like Janine mentioned, the energetic factors are also important. And we need to focus on what's the potential aspects that is going to have in the agriculture. We have lots of impacts from environmental change. That's why there will be some difficulty accessing traditional financing solutions. And we believe that that will be important. Without a further ado, I would give the go-ahead for the speakers. Thank you for your attention. Yes, thank you, Antonio. You're giving us a whole roadmap to be clear on all the information that is going to be presented to us. To continue with our second phase of this event, Andrea, she is going to continue being the moderator for this part of the session.
And I'm going to switch to English. So thank you, Antonio and Grecia, and good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Valeria Correa, and I am the project manager for the Green Innovative Finance for LAC initiative, which is led by UNDP and also with Let's LAC for this activity. I am part of the environment and energy team for Latin America and the Caribbean at UNDP, and I'm very honored to moderate this session today on blended finance and how it can work to mobilize finance for energy, for nature, and for climate. So we are really, I'm very excited. We're joined by two distinguished guests, Mr. Ricardo Marshall from Barbados and Mr. Wilson Sierra from Uruguay. I will be moderating this session both in English and Spanish, so make sure that you have your translation on so you can bear with me as I exchange between languages. So we can stop sharing the screen if you want so we can see the speakers. And I am going to briefly introduce our guest. We have Mr. Ricardo Marshall. He's a career public servant with holistic thinking and practical knowledge across a wide range of technical subjects related to sustainable development and climate change in response to small island developing states. He has represented Barbados and the Alliance of Island Developing States on matters related to adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage, climate finance and climate justice. And he has spent most of his career serving in the ministries responsible for environment and health, but he also joined the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs and Investment as the director of the Sustainable Development section, and also as the director of the Roof to Reefs program, which he'll talk a little bit today about. And this portfolio has now been transferred to the Prime Minister office where he sits now. So thank you and welcome, Ricardo. Thank you so much for being with us today. Por otro lado, gracias. Por otro lado, me complace presentarles a Wilson Sierra. Wilson es gerente del área.
I would like to introduce Wilson Sierra. He's the manager from renewable energy from the National Directorate from the Ministry of Uruguay, and he is working from the chemical department. He has been working in the Ministry of the Industry and Mining, and he has been a leader there since 2011. He has actively worked in incorporation processes of renewable energies, and he has worked in multiple activities in the corporation South and South when it comes to renewable energies with diverse country of Latin America. He represents Uruguay in different forums in such related topics. Welcome, Wilson. I'm going to continue in Spanish. Okay, we have invited you here as representatives from Uruguay and Barbados because you have many examples or many cases in which you were able to use blended finance, which is a tool that helps us to receive better financing when it comes to energy and adaptation to weather, to climate change, sorry. And from Uruguay, you have some projects that include blended finance regarding renewable energy. So can you explain what's the objective of this fund and why we prioritize this blended finance in face of other objectives or other solutions? Go ahead. Yes. Good morning. I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted to share for brief minutes on my experience of RAVE. And I would like to share the way that this fund has been inserted into an ambitious process, which is energetic transition. It is important to understand why do we come to this instrument. When we started incorporating this proposal of using this type of mechanisms, we were coming from a successful project of energetic transition. We have public companies involved, and we were able to decarbonize the energetic sector. And when we needed to face new challenge, well, we had a new problem. And this was related to finance. The beginning phase was not a problem. We were using basic mechanisms of finance. We were having a like retail finance, you would say, because you have minor players involved. And but we have this other case. We have another phase in which decisions were case to case. And we needed to innovate on the type of solutions that we were using. So in order to accelerate energetic transitions, we started focusing on areas where clean technologies were not accessing finance. And this is where we developed this instrument, which is the Innovation Fund on Renewable Energies. It enables to leverage private resources with a minor effort that if you will get a direct grant, for example, or any other mechanisms that we use before. So the objective is developing an instrument that seeks to mobilize this private financing that would be favorable for them. So here what we do is we blend financing, but this doesn't end with receiving financing. We accompany all the process. We work with non-reimbursable technical consultation. We beyond what could be the favorable conditions, we also generate knowledge of technology, appropriation of technology, because we are in an area in which risk is the highest that you could have. So you would say that we are entering an area of innovation, and at the same time, since 2016, we were looking to act into other areas of impact, gender equality, sexual abuse control, also following environmental indicators. All of that was a requirement, and we were trying to respond to the objective of sustainable development as a holistic approach. So that would be the example of the road that we have been through. Yes, many things that you're mentioning is quite interesting. You're discussing things like not it's only important to leverage, but we need to have things related to technical consultation that comes from these funds, because we could in that way understand what each key role could contribute.
Go now with you, Ricardo. In the case of Barbados, you have very recently finished, well, or signed an agreement for blended finance with experience of the Barbados Blue and Green Bank, which will bring together the public, private, and multilateral institutions to ensure green financing for adaptation and mitigation projects. Can you please share more in depth the choice of this instrument? And maybe you can mention some of the other instruments, because I know Barbados has selected other instruments based on the objectives sought in terms of the environmental goals. So yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the Blue and Green Bank, but I know you have other instruments as well that are very interested.
Thank you very much, Vilera. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, colleagues, and I am grateful for the invitation from UNDP. When we look at the main objectives of the implementation of the instrument, we need to step back a little bit to look at the bigger picture. So that for Barbados, reform of the global financial architecture is key in making financing available for those of us from the developing world. Traditionally, you've had the Bretton Woods institutions, which were formed after the Second World War to rebuild Europe. But that is still the same agencies that we find ourselves going to now, most specifically the IMF and the World Bank. And they're really not fit for purpose to serve the overall needs of the developing world. In addition to that, when we look at climate finance, we treat climate finance as a toolbox. And it means that you have to pick the correct tool to be able to effectively address the issues that you are facing. And the reason why I say that is because we have a number of different examples of differing instruments or tools that we have used depending on what it is that we're facing. So we have the Blue-Green Bank, as you would have mentioned. We also completed a few years ago a debt for nature swap and the establishment of the Barbados Environmental Sustainability Fund. And for us, that was a really critical one because we demonstrated that even though our debt was trading at par, we were still able to do a debt for nature swap. We have as well just completed the details on the first debt for climate swap. We've also been involved in blue and green bonds, establishment of contingent credit facilities, utilization of policy-based loans, revolving loan funds, etc. Specifically with respect to the Blue-Green Bank, the reason why we've sought to establish the Blue-Green Bank is to provide that green financing for mainly mitigation projects. But because those mitigation projects have a revenue stream, what it means is that it frees up government to be able to put additional financing behind adaptation projects which don't have that revenue stream. We're therefore freeing up fiscal space, we're reducing risk, and we are excuse me, in a partnership with a number of different types of partners. Private sector, including our accredited entity Pegasus, the Green Climate Fund, CAF, USAID, believe it or not. One of the last things USAID actually distributed money for was to facilitate the establishment and setup of the Blue-Green Bank in that respect. And we're also right now discussing with other countries in the Caribbean coming on board and putting financing into the Blue-Green Bank for an opportunity to access that sort of financing.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, and so interesting to learn. I like what you've said, that you have to pick it as a toolbox and pick depending on the purpose. And I think Barbados has done really well, and congratulations on how you have picked the different instruments. And you've mentioned one that we will, and this is just a commercial, that we will talk about next on our next session, which is debt for nature swap and debt for climate swap, which is actually one of the first ones that you have as a Barbados. But yeah, I think, as you said, also one of the interesting things is that you can free fiscal space a little bit as well, and that's one of the things that some of the developing countries in the region, especially in Latin America and especially in the Caribbean, need to do. So I think this talks a little bit about what is the benefit of this instrument. But I'm going to move, and I'm going to continue with you, Ricardo, if you wish. Can you please describe a little bit more, and I know that you're just starting on the process of the Blue and Green Bank. How do you plan to do the implementation, and which are the key areas you're looking to cover for the operations of its work? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I forgot I closed the microphone. The important thing is that we've actually been at this for a while. We initially conceptualized this as part of our climate and finance experts group with the government of Barbados a few years ago, maybe about 2021, 2022. And then we developed it more with our accredited entity partner, Pegasus. We approached the GCF. We went through the entire process and we got approval. We then had that full development of the proposal, which included the involvement of the stakeholders. We went through the approval of the GCF, the setup in law by Parliament of Barbados, the establishment and identification of the Board of Governors, and now we're in the implementation stage. It is not going to be a typical bank in terms of individual persons coming in and taking deposits and that sort of thing. It really is projects related. And the two areas that we have identified specifically to address at the initial stages are related to housing and to water. And the idea is behind it, the opportunity to expand the implementation of Government of Barbados's plans with respect to a program called HOPE, Home Ownership Providing Energy. And the idea is that we're building climate resilient homes to Category 3, Category 4 hurricane standards that have in provisions for integration of solar panels for generation of electricity, high roofs to provide cooling, roofing systems that tie the roof into the overall structure so that the roof is not easily lifted off in a hurricane event. We have hurricane resistant windows and doors. The structure itself is built up off of the ground to reduce impacts from flooding. It also provides opportunities for rainwater harvesting and for infiltration of water into the aquifer. The key thing there is that it really provides a program for low and middle income persons to be able to have a housing unit at 20% less cost and to go through that overall process, utilizing the government institutions there for providing housing, as well as the commercial banks and credit unions who we are in partnership with. We're also utilizing local small contractors to do the construction so that we can essentially build on those skills. And the idea is that if we can take the mitigation related opportunities and finance those, then we can free up that financing otherwise. We're also looking at another program called SHIFT, Small Home Income Generating Facilities Trust, which is looking at upgrading the homes of existing persons. So HOPE is new homes, SHIFT is for existing homes, and then we're looking at water and so forth. And we are right now at the very point of rolling that out. And so it's a very exciting time for us in that respect.
No, thank you, Ricardo. And super interesting to know also like the social aspect of this, and especially the adaptation apps, and you're increasing resilience for all those communities that you can make those shifts by also increasing or decreasing their energy consumption. So thank you so much. Volvanti Wilson, y tal vez nos puedes contar también desde Uruguay, obviamente esto
Let's
está
go
más
back to you, Wilson, and maybe from the Uruguay perspective, could you
este
share these experiences based on energy? And I know that you also have some implementing projects that are very interesting using this kind of funds for waste management, for energy purposes, also transportation, greener transportation. So could you share a little bit about these implementation processes for the projects? And how did you achieve this co-financing for this
Sí, cómo no, con
project?
gusto. Digo,
Yes.
de hecho, cuando
Actually,
cuando uno piensa en retrospectiva cómo fue el proceso de
when
la
we
implementación
think now about the
del
implementing
fondo, bueno, vamos a
process for these
identificar
funds, we
una
identify that
de las
one
dificultades que
of
teníamos,
the
que quedaba
challenges
bien
that we
planteada
face
en la presentación que hacía Antonio
that
sobre el
was
programa, pasaba
very
por el
well
tema
explained by
de
Antonio's
el rol
presentation
que este tipo de instrumentos
was
tiene al
related
momento de
to
mitigar riesgos adicionales.
the importance that
Y es así
this
que el
kind of
foco estuvo
financing
puesto en
has for
4 verticales.
mitigating some
Una de
risks.
ellas
And we
atendía a
focused
temas
on
de
4
almacenamiento
elements. The
de
first one was
energía,
related
otra todo lo
to
que es el concepto
storage
Power to
for
X,
energy. The
el
other
tema
was power
de
to X.
la transición energética tiene
Then
impactos
energy
ambientales,
transaction that has
asumir ese
environmental
pasivo como
impacts,
parte
and
integral de
to
la economía
assume
también
this
es
kind
una de
of
las verticales que debemos trabajar.
risks.
Y la cuarta pasaba por el capítulo de
And the fourth
movilidad,
factor
que daba por
was
fuera todo
the
lo que era
mobility.
lo clásico y lo financiable por mecanismos
The
regulares de la
classical, the
banca, como puede ser
traditional, the
emisión de
financing by the
paneles solares,
banking
realización de
assets
aerogeneradores, todo eso
were
quedaba por
left
fuera
behind
del alcance.
this approach.
Quizá una
And
de las dificultades,
maybe
es
one
un
of
lindo problema,
the
en
main
realidad,
challenges,
como
that was
esas
a nice
4 verticales
challenge
no avanzaban y no
because
aparece, lo que tuvimos
we
fue
were
una
seeing that,
sobredemanda en algunos de los
that
componentes que
after
llevó
that we had
de alguna
an
manera, intentar,
over
bueno,
demand for
frenemos, no
one of
demos rienda
these
suelta a esto porque los
components.
fondos son agotados, cosa de poder
And we
habilitar el
knew
desarrollo de
that
inversiones
the
en las
funds
zonas
were
que venían un
limited.
poquito más rezagadas.
So
Claramente
we
el
needed
capítulo de
to
movilidad era
have
el que
this into
teníamos más maduro por
consideration.
aspectos que veníamos trabajando
The
en el pasado, y cuando uno mira el conjunto de
mobility
la
was more
cartera de
important
proyectos que
because
han
of our
recibido
past
financiación
experiences. And when
tiene un
we
papel
see our
destacado, pero
project
se ha de
portfolio,
alguna manera
this factor
priorizado el
has been
intentar
stagnated.
generar
And we have
acciones concretas
prioritized to
por alguno
generate
de los otros capítulos,
actions
particularmente
based
el tema de
on
residuos,
these other
el tema
factors,
de ir a otras
especially
áreas
waste
como puede ser
management,
el sector
and also
servicios,
moving into other areas, for
temas
example,
relacionados al
services
proyecto
or
al capítulo de
some projects
hotelería,
related to
o
hospitality
cosas de descarbonización, por ejemplo, de la producción
or
de cable, almacenamiento energético.
decarbonization. We have had
Digamos, el
also this
intentar
kind of
avanzar en paralelo
projects,
es
and
un desafío
trying to
importante.
move
El
forward
otro
in parallel
aspecto
is
relacionado
a
al tema de
big
la
challenge.
implementación,
Another
cómo es que,
aspect
bueno, cómo
related
se
to
logró
implementation,
remontar,
to
es
see
sobre todo el tema
how we
de la
overcome this
marcación, dar a
challenge,
conocer
was
el instrumento,
branding,
el recorrer
to
esa etapa
raise
con la
awareness
banca
about this
tradicional con la cual
instrument,
firmamos
and
acuerdos.
also the
Nosotros tenemos
banking.
7 bancos de plaza
Now we have
con los cuales
7
tenemos acuerdos,
banks
y son ventanillas por las cuales ingresan
where we
estos
have some
ejecutivos.
agreements,
Y también el tema de alfabetizar
and also
al sector empresarial
to
local en
train
torno a
the private
a este nuevo
sector
tipo de mecanismos. Porque
relating to this
no
new
estaban
mechanism,
habituados,
because they were
ellos
not
identificaran
used
cuál era el
to
plus que les
using this
generaba
mechanism, and they needed to
una
identify
ventanilla que,
the
bueno, que si
added
bien era un poco más
value
demandante, puesto que desde el
to
proyecto
use it,
requería
because it was a little
una
bit more
aproximación
demanding, because the
contemplando más de una
project
dimensión,
required
tradicionalmente la
an
dimensión
estimate
que
contemplating
dominaba
more
era la
than one
técnica y la económica. Acá
dimension,
estamos cargando otras dimensiones, estamos cargando la dimensión
and
social, la
the
dimensión ambiental.
requirements included a
A los
social
hechos, al
dimension,
momento
an
de
environmental
obtener el préstamo,
dimension.
terminaba siendo mucho más fácil después
But when
en la
they
banca.
did
Entonces,
get this loan, the
ese
banking
aspecto,
structure was
digamos,
easier.
tuvo su fase lag, o sea, llevó su tiempo de
So we had
implementación. Fue
this
un proceso capaz que un poquito
long
lento, pero
process.
resultó
It was a
robusto.
kind of a
Y hoy por
slow
hoy, como
process, but
estamos en el nivel de mostrar que,
nowadays
bueno, que
we
da los
can
primeros pasos en
show
torno a sostenerse
that
más allá de el apoyo
we were
inicial que
able
quizás de un
to
instrumento, que sí
take
es otro
these
aspecto
first
importante
steps.
al momento de lograr digamos, continuidad en el tiempo.
And this was
Y
important to
fundamentalmente,
have this continuity
visto del
in
sector
time.
público, el otro
And
aspecto
regarding
importante al
the
momento de la
public sector,
implementación
another
es
important
cómo habla
aspect for
con otras
implementing
políticas
it is
públicas. Esto
how
nace al impulso
discuss
como
how
ustedes
it
sabrán,
is
nosotros venimos también
the debate with other
aplicaciones
public
renovables, pero bueno,
policies.
A poco de avanzar, llegamos a que esto habla con la economía circular.
And we understood that this was going to be aligned with circular economy and other strategies that we have implemented in our country. So this same instrument or this same concept could be extended, and nowadays we are in the final stage of this implementation for the first part of the project, and now we are thinking that this instrument is going to extend the action scope, and also that it is going to be aligned with other public policies. And we're going to leverage this learning and take it to these other policies.
No, muchas gracias, Wilson.
Thank you very much,
y bueno, ya para ir
Wilson.
cerrando, porque
And to close, because we are always lacking time, you mentioned some of the things such as lessons learned that you have had in this process. And the participants are also very active in the live streaming. And now we're going to share some lessons learned. So you have been mentioning some of these lessons learned, but also how to manage or measure the demand that some services are going to have. So maybe you can share two top lessons learned from Uruguay, from the Uruguay perspective. Well, the first from the public sector perspective is that this is an initiative that was born, driven by a ministry, but it is going to be aligned to other ministries. It is going to work with different agents. So we have to have this comprehensive perspective, and this is a key element. And the second lesson learned is to have a partner such as the United Nations. The agencies work together, and this connection is very important. And from the operational perspective, to create a technical committee, an investment committee that measures the projects from a technical and economic perspective, and also from the environmental and social perspective. And this committee needs to assess, to guarantee that these projects are complying with all the requirements. So these are the two components. From the political perspective and also the technical perspectives, I think these are our two main lessons learned. Thank you very much, Wilson. And this is a successful case to duplicate in the region. And Wilson is going to share his link as well. Yes, I'm going to share some information as well. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to you, Ricardo. And from the Barbados experience, what lessons does your country have right now from implementing this toolbox of instruments that you've mentioned at the beginning, and anything that you have recognized and share with the example of Uruguay? I think you've both talked a little bit about, the importance of coordinating between sectors and also taking the benefits of seeing this more as an integral, projects or initiatives rather than just climate focus or social focus or financial focus. So yeah, what are your biggest lessons learned so far?
Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting just now to hear Wilson's views, because they mirror mine quite closely. First of all, you need to be holistic in your thinking. What we are looking at is sustainable climate resilient development in a world in which climate change is a broad-reaching, cross-cutting issue that impacts all sectors. And so what we needed to understand is that we needed that holistic policy. And the program that I lead provides that linkage with the other national programs like our physical development plan, our investment plan, our NDCs, our economic transformation and sustainability planning, that sort of thing, so that you get that holistic national policy coverage that then spills down to the individual sectors. And under the Roofs to Reefs program, we've identified 6 key sectors that if you touch those, you touch all of the others. Those are housing, water, waste, energy, ecosystems, and land use. And land use is the big one. That includes transportation, that includes telecommunications, it includes agriculture. I think the second lesson that we've really learned is that building out these instruments takes time. It takes a significant amount of time from very, very busy partners. But the good thing is that once you've taken that first step, even though each has to be unique in and of itself relative to the project or program and relative to the country, there are some overall things that you can learn to improve your ability to execute them in the future. And I think the third thing that we have learned is that small countries in this region, from the Caribbean, from Central America, from South America, can be world leaders in the space. And we can demonstrate success from a homegrown perspective that we can then feel free to export to the rest of the world as well.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for closing with those very inspiring words at the end. I think, as you know, this part of one of the things of the program is that we want to share the experiences in the region because there's so many. Because it can be replicated, and that's one of the objectives of this program, and that's why we will be also launching some case studies from these conversations so that people can learn really from the experiences in the region and not have to invent the wheel, as you said. But thank you, Bauer. I think it's clear that blended finance is not only a tool for mobilizing resources, but also to build resilience, to help social context, and to have innovation in climate, energy, nature, and all the sectors that you mentioned at the end, Ricardo, as well. So it also speaks about how collaboration is needed. And I think you both talked a little bit about collaboration, both between the private and public sector, but also like between ministries that sometimes do not speak to each other. And I think both of the examples really talk about how it is possible to make these transitions, energy adaptation, but you need to have collaboration and plan ahead, and also have the time to, well, more than have the time, know that it will take time to have this instruments be successful. So thank you so much. I know we're running out of time, but I am gonna open the floor, and I do invite everyone, if you have any questions, to please open the microphone. I also have the team checking on the live streaming to tell me if there's any questions on the live streaming. For any of our speakers, really take advantage that we have them here. Y si tienen alguna pregunta, por favor, si quieren abrir micrófonos, están más que bienvenidos. Y si no, también vamos a ver si hay alguna en el live streaming.
If you have any questions, please go ahead, and we are always seeing if in the streaming someone is asking questions as well.
Jesús, tienes la mano levantada. Adelante.
Jesus, you have raised your hand. Yes, Valeria, thank you very much. And thank you very much to the speakers. I was listening about all these initiatives, and my question is about the money that was used in these initiatives. I wanted to see if this money, these financial resources, was mobilized. I think this is a cross-sectional question. Yes, we did understand the question. I'm going to start with Wilson. The question is about the mobilization of resources in dollars that you have achieved for this program.
The question after Wilson, how much has been the dollar amount of mobilization of finance that you've achieved between some of these instruments? Wilson, empezamos contigo.
Bueno, a ver, todo esto nace con unos fondos concursables a nivel de
Yes,
Naciones
this
Unidas.
started with some funds from the United Nations.
Que tenía un total de $10 millones.
It was a total amount of $10 million that Uruguay received. With this amount, we intend to have this project done.
no aspiracional, vamos a ver qué tanto logramos cerrar. Ya digo, por el lado de algunos verticales, claramente
And
la
we
rueda
have
empieza a funcionar.
some factors that are working, of course.
Poder darle continuidad mucho
And
más
our
allá
goal is to
del
provide
propósito del programa, o sea que
continuity
podemos estar
beyond the
muy cerca
scope of
de
this
cambiar la
program.
ruta.
So we are very
Ok,
close to reach our goal.
ese es el orden de magnitud del fondo involucrado.
Gracias, Wilson.
Thank you
Ricardo,
very
maybe
much,
can I go with you about
Wilson.
the amount of mobilization that you've been able to done with some of these instruments?
Thank you so much. If we start with the Blue Green Bank, our initial objective was to generate $30 million US in seed capital for the bank, and that started off with an agreement that between the government of Barbados and the Green Climate Fund would provide approximately 15 million each. We've already gotten that. We have also then gone beyond that. USAID has provided us with an additional $5 million US towards the cost of the setup of the bank. Pegasus, our international partners themselves, have indicated that they're going to be putting in substantial funds as well. CAF has pledged an additional 10 or 15 million in seed financing that we're discussing with them right now, and there's potential for another 10 million from the Bahamas and another 10 million from Guyana, and that money will then be used to essentially crowd in additional financing to be able to get that done. We're right on the edge of doing that. In addition, with respect to the debt for nature, we were able to repurchase initially 77.6 million US dollars in Eurobond debt that was at 6.5%, at 92 or so cents on the dollar, and another 73 million US dollars of an 8% domestic bond. We made an agreement with Credit Suisse, and IDB and TNC are the guarantors for the loan, and we have found ourselves in a situation where we have been able to make those savings while looking at goals for protection of biodiversity resources. We've generated approximately $1.5 million per year for the last 3 years going into our BSF, which is our Environmental Sustainability Fund, to disburse grants for conservation practitioners in Barbados. We expect that $17 million endowment to grow to $27 million by 2023. In addition, under our debt for climate swap, we have been able to generate 125 million US dollars in fiscal savings, which will then be put into the tertiary development of our sewage treatment systems, so that we're in the end going to have a tertiary plant that provides both for recharge of aquifers as well as water for irrigation purposes, and stopping water that would traditionally have entered into the marine environment from polluting the marine environment, reducing groundwater pollution as well, and safeguarding public health. So we've been able in many ways to generate financing as well as to do the other components that we have been discussing. So we have 3 examples there of one that is well in train and working for a number of years, one that is about to be launched, and one that we have just finalized. I have provided some examples of each of those in a presentation that I believe is going to be shared with all of the participants so that you can have those additional details at your fingertips.
No, thank you, Ricardo. And very impressive. And yeah, we had shared via email to our participants the slides, but we will put them again in the chat. And Wilson, adelante para ti.
Wilson, go ahead, please.
Sí, no, si me permitía simplemente complementar, porque en realidad,
Yes, I just want to add
con el planteo
on this
inicial,
information,
esto no es exclusivamente fondos
because
movilizados
this is
per se,
not
sino
exclusively
tiene otras
funds
actividades que
mobilized,
poder mencionar
but we
cosas
have other
adicionales,
additional
aspectos
activities.
adicionales
So I'm
relacionados con
going to mention some
el
two
fondo
other
total del
aspects.
REI, con
So the total amount is 10 million. Now we have 14 projects with an investment about $3.8 million, and we have mobilized 22 from the private sector. And in addition, we have 250 people who have received training regarding these financial instruments, and also some technical support that has allowed us to offer this regulatory system, and also some technical specific regulations to facilitate the access to finance from this specific financing mechanism. So beside the $22 million, we have other elements that are important. And also this, we also have the benefits, the tons of CO2 that have been mitigated every year. And also we have an aspirational goal of 100,000 tons of CO2 in the life cycle of the project.
You're saying it's important, Wilson, because in addition of all the mobilization of resources, we are discussing co-benefits and it could include a beneficial economic benefit. And the inaction that we're having as a government is important because maybe it could generate more impact. So that's why it's important to talk about the benefits. We have questions such as, I don't know if you have considered this, Antonio, but experiences on mixed finance regarding insurance. This is the first question. And now the next question that we had in the live streaming in YouTube is the agricultural sector. And how we have been benefited through these programs.
Sí, ahí voy a recurrir a una de mis frases de cabeceras que es habla poco de lo que sabes y nada de lo que ignoras. Y sinceramente
let's say talk about what you want and nothing of what you ignore, for example, right? And this is something that we could discuss. So using both, it's important. I don't have a response when it comes to insurance or coverage, but I'm sure that I'm going to give you an answer because I need to do some research on that behalf. But, well, related to the second question, the area of performance for the agriculture sector, it's important. We are working in the secondary and energetic industrial sector, and of course this is supplementary in a way.
Sí, perfecto. Ricardo, I don't know if you have any experience or have any insurance companies or have been involved in any of the financing of the instruments that you have used, and also for the agro sector, like if is there any involvement in some of the projects or that you have?
Yes, thank you so much. We've had quite a bit of interaction with the insurance sector. It is a little bit difficult in some ways for them, but of course we have the CRIF, which we have been working on, and we have combined the CRIF with the other stuff that we've been doing with respect to the IDB on our contingent credit facility to be able to ensure that if we are struck by an event, we're able to address those things. And I think outside of just insurance, I think I wanted to mention at this stage as well our integration of debt pause clauses into all of our instruments. And we're also in significant discussions with the insurance sector right now about how building out climate resilience for both public and private sector can be reflected in reduced premiums at the end of the day. It has not concluded discussions, but the discussions are ongoing. With respect to agriculture, I think one good example that I used is the debt for climate swap, where the idea is that we would be putting water into the agricultural sector. That is one of the real limiting factors in Barbados for agriculture because we are one of the top 15 most water scarce countries in the world. In addition to that, we are discussing not just amongst agriculture, but a number of different sectors on opportunities for using agricultural residue and other waste for generation of green energy. And we're also looking at vertical farming and rainwater capture. So we've had a program with the 5Cs and the GCF where we have been looking at capturing rainwater and utilizing that in the agricultural sector, especially for small farmers. We also have a program between one of the private sector entities in Barbados, C.O. Williams, the government of Barbados through the Barbados Agricultural Development and Management Corporation, and through the Ministry of Agriculture with a Land for the Landless Farmers program, where we have built an area to capture runoff water and then pump that water to the fields for irrigation purposes. So those are just some of the examples that I can give.
No, thank you, Ricardo. No, and thank you for all the examples. I think some of the topics that you've just mentioned are super interesting. Hopefully we can maybe have a session. I think the insurance section is especially with adaptation right now is a very interesting topic to keep exploring. So yeah, but I think we're running out of time. But I really just want to thank you, and maybe like we can do some, I know there's like an emoji or something for a round of applause for our amazing guests, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time, both Ricardo and Wilson, and for sharing your knowledge and your experience. It's been a really enriching conversation, at least for me, and I'm sure that for all the participants. Así que muchísimas gracias, Wilson y Ricardo, por su tiempo. Ha sido increíble.
Thank you, Wilson and Ricardo, for your time. It was incredible to hear from you. I would like to congratulate you because you have gone a long way with all of this implementation. So thank you. Okay, thank you, Valeria. We would like to thank again our speakers. And just to have a little reminder, in Zoom and YouTube, all of this information will be available if you want to look at it again in a recording. So thank you. Now we're going to continue with our plenary session. For that, we want lots of participation from you. We're going to have some questions. I would ask their speakers if they have the time. They can join us in this session also in order for us to use all the information that we can. Okay, so the first question in this roundtable or this debate session would be, what other similar experiences you have heard in your countries or within your region? I don't know if maybe you could share or open up the mic to discuss what are these experiences that you were able to see in this case.
También le pido a nuestros expositores que también han podido tener más experiencia en el tema. Si han
So we're going to hear about several things that include lessons learned in this case.